The original Watch Dogs is now officially over 10 years old, and a lot has changed for the IP in the decades since. Watch Dogs was a series that could never fully get off the ground, and the launch of each game was met with some kind of setback. The original, of course, had this big controversy because the game's graphics didn't live up to the quality shown in the E3 trailer. The second Watch Dogs was very well received on launch, but didn't initially sell well, likely because a lot of people felt burned by the first game. And Watch Dogs Legion, well, it just underperformed in many ways, and the underwhelming response to that game was likely one of the final nails in the coffin for the Watch Dogs series. I made a video about a year and a half ago now, talking about how it's been pretty much abandoned by Ubisoft, as there are currently no games in development, and seemingly no plans for there to be at all in the near future. However, strangely enough, they are still making a Watch Dogs movie, which is a bit weird, making a movie adaptation for a series you're not even making games for anymore. But who knows, maybe they'll use that movie as a way to judge the interest in the IP and decide if they'll make more Watch Dogs games going forward. But all that aside, we're here to talk about the original Watch Dogs today, that first released on May 27th of 2014. I think 2014 was such an underrated year for Ubisoft games. You had Watch Dogs, Far Cry 4, Assassin's Creed Rogue, and Unity all in the same year. But obviously, as I mentioned previously, while the original Watch Dogs still initially performed well, there was a controversy because the game didn't look like its trailers. Which, for someone who wasn't even aware of this controversy at the time I first played it, it obviously didn't affect me. I enjoyed it then, and I still really enjoy the original Watch Dogs to this day. I honestly believed for a long time it was one of the more underrated Ubisoft games out there, and so many people had just disregarded it because of that whole trailer fiasco. In fact, Watch Dogs 1 is still my personal favorite game of the series. I really like 2 as well, and people will go back and forth on which one is better, but I really think it just depends on your preference. Watch Dogs 2 was a great sequel, and it brought the series back into people's good graces at the time, but I personally always preferred the tone, setting, and characters of the first game. Even though the dark tone is what some people disliked about the first Watch Dogs game, that's what made it appeal to me so much. I'd always thought Aiden Pierce was an extremely underrated protagonist, and his story captivated me a lot more than 2's and Legion's. Now, like I said, I still really like Watch Dogs 2, and I can see why a lot of people would prefer that game and its lighter, more upbeat tone and characters. Whichever one you prefer really depends on your own tastes. But I think in the 10 years since its release, Watch Dogs has aged very well. Not only in public opinion, as I think feelings around this game grew a lot more positive over time, but of course, as a game itself, it still holds up very well, even without some of those insane weather effects and reflections from the E3 trailers, which you can actually restore in the game through mods now. I love the setting in Chicago, although as I've mentioned before, I may be a little bit biased since I'm from there, but I think it's the perfect city to fit and encapsulate the tone of the game. And with a compelling protagonist like Aiden at the helm, it was easy to get submersed into the story and setting. It is a very heavy and tragic story, which is what turned some people away from it, but that to me is what made it so compelling. The way it tackles grief, guilt, and revenge feels very real. I love the whole family dynamic with Aiden, his sister Nikki, and nephew Jackson, and I feel like it's the kind of story you don't often see from a Ubisoft game, especially now. These are all things a game like Watch Dogs Legion sorely lacked, which is even more evident since the Bloodlines DLC with Aiden and Wrench is the best part of that game. I honestly believed they could have had Legion be an Aiden Pierce sequel, and it would have been infinitely better. Even though it was an interesting idea, trying to allow players to experience the story through the lens of any NPC, the idea kind of falls flat though when you realize none of these NPCs have any personality or unique traits to latch onto. Now of course, when it comes to the gameplay loop, the GTA influence is very clear. The first Watch Dogs game came out about 7 months after GTA 5, interestingly enough, but this game still had its own identity and unique twist on the open world genre, especially with the hacking element. Having your own sandbox where you can hack all sorts of city infrastructure that can dynamically affect the world around you, or profile and see random information about all the NPCs and stopping potential crimes. That's what made Watch Dogs unique, and far more than just a GTA clone. The opening to this game is incredible too. That moment where you cause a blackout inside the stadium to escape the cops is one of my favorite moments of the whole series, and a great way of showing what Watch Dogs is all about in a nutshell. The gunplay, while fairly basic, is still satisfying. The weapons have a lot of kick and recoil to them, which creates more of a learning curve to get better at controlling them. There's a decent amount of stealth in the game as well, which I always appreciate. I love the takedown animations with the retractable baton. I see a lot of people say this game is like the closest thing we've had to a true John Wick game, just in terms of gameplay, tone, even some of the broader ideas of the story are rather similar, and I think that's the ultimate compliment. I'd say this game and Max Payne are probably the two closest things you can get to a John Wick game. Funnily enough, this game only came out a few months before the first John Wick movie, but it's definitely a game that fulfills that John Wick-like fantasy, and its darker, more serious tone aligns with that more than the second game. I just all around really enjoy this game, and if they were ever to make another Watch Dogs game, I think they should aim for a similar tone and style of the first game. I feel that's what fits Watch Dogs best, but that's just me. Overall, it's aged incredibly well for a 10-year-old game. It doesn't look quite as good as, say, Assassin's Creed Unity, which launched in the same year, but this game was launched on the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation as well, while Unity was a next-gen only title, so that makes sense. It's too bad the marketing soured the game for a lot of people, because I truly believe there was a very underrated game underneath all that for people to find if they were willing to give it a try. I also just feel this came out in an era where Ubisoft had much better storytelling in their games. It wasn't afraid to have a story cover such bleak topics and themes. I certainly think it's worth playing now if you haven't, with how cheap you can get it. I really want to fully replay the game soon and make a full in-depth review, so hopefully I can do that somewhat soon. But happy 10-year-old birthday, Watch Dogs. I can't believe it's already been a full decade since this game has come out. Let me know what you guys think about the original Watch Dogs if you've played it, and how it's aged in the 10 years since its release. And do you hope to see another Watch Dogs game in the future? As always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like, and considered subscribing to the channel if you're new. And other than that, thanks for watching everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
I told you to take these dolls back to the toy store, or give them to your niece, or whatever you want to do with them, because I can't have the man that I'm living with playing with dolls!
Hello, personal space.
Those are, they're gonna put our kids through college. What? Yeah, fine. I'm headed with you.
Please don't do that.